Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show, coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska, where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started. What's good, Alaska? This is Scott Levesque, and you're listening to the Daily Dose of the Must Read Alaska podcast. I want to welcome everybody on this wonderful Thursday. It is a balmy 22, 23 here in Anchorage, and it is bright outside right now, and it's great to see the beautiful snow. Today, I have the great and all-powerful Suzanne Downing with me, our fearless leader. Suzanne, how you doing?
Hey, it's great to be back in Anchorage. I was in Juneau for the past few days doing a meet and greet with a lot of people. There was some wonderful events down there. Plus, then there was also the beginning of the legislative session. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite things about Juneau is the 5 flights out a day, and I'm back in Anchorage today.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to have you back in the building, and it's great to have you here in town. I can tell you this: one of the exciting things, Suzanne, is that we hit over 200 reviews on the Apple Podcast app. We're at 205.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, phenomenal. We kind of busting through the seams there in the reviews. So thank you to our listeners and our readers and our supporters. Guys, this is incredible. But let's get into today's show because I'm really excited and really kind of I'm interested to learn more about Kevin Cross. Now, Kevin Cross is a assembly candidate that is running in District 2, I believe. And that's out in Eagle River, Chugiak area. And Kevin, thanks for joining with us today.
I really appreciate it, Scott. Thanks for taking time for me this morning.
No problem. Hey, listen, I think the first things first, can we get a little bit of a background? I know you were born and raised here in, Anchorage, really, but kind of give us a little bit of background leading up to you running for assembly here.
Yeah, it's funny. I appreciate you asking that. If you ask my wife, she would tell you that I have swore a million times I'd never get into politics. Never considered it was the kind of person I was. I'm you're like you said, born and raised in Alaska. My first job was cleaning. My dad owned a Chevron station. I started like 10 or 11 cleaning gas station bathrooms, which is, by the way, gas station bathrooms, which is very humbling. Of all the worst jobs you could do to build character in a child, that's where you start. And so then, was doing basic mechanics and stuff. I've always worked with my hands. I've worked in the trades. I actually worked construction, doing framing through high school, working on job sites. In Alaska, as long as you're not afraid to work, I've never not been able to find a job here, from washing windows to shoveling driveways. I mean, we really breed a magnificent caliber of human being when you're raised here, and that, when you got to get up when it's dark and shovel 18 inches of snow just to go to your job in the dark, to go home in the dark to shovel more snow, you just can't be afraid to work. So, yeah, I was a pipe fitter, working on the slope and in native villages. I like to joke that my idea of skincare is stitches. And if you were to say plastic surgery, I think you were talking about fiberglass boat repair. So, I honestly, I don't own a single necktie. And so people are always like, hey, Kev, I put a tie, I got this scarf. I can use it to do a bowline or a half hitch, tie down some cargo in the bed of my truck. But, I've never found myself really drawn to politics until the last several years. I got into real estate after I worked on the slope and I worked different areas as a pipe fitter. I started buying distressed properties and trying to fix them up. I've always been a huge advocate for affordable housing. I've always been blown away at how expensive houses have been getting, right? You look at a 65-inch flat screen TV and the price is, for $299, but houses just keep doubling the cost and expense around it. So I've always just said, hey, listen, what can I do to try to make housing more affordable? Buy distressed properties, fix them up, sell them for a discount so people can get into them. I was president of the Board of Realtors in 2014 and fought down in Juneau and down in DC, trying to help property owners and trying to help protecting private property rights. And then now in the last 3.5 years, I've served on the platting board, where now I serve as chair of the platting board, still helping protect private property rights, your right to reasonably develop your land and not be just burdened with the process, which frankly is just overwhelmingly confusing for the average individual trying to just develop their own land. It's just the amount of bureaucracy is absurd. And the more I get involved with it, I just saw more red tape, more struggle for the homeowner and the small business person. And at some point, you realize either you do something about it or you're going to have a heart attack from all the just being frustrated with the process.
Right.
I think Jamie Allard probably got tired of me texting and emailing her and saying, what is going on in the assembly? And this is BS. And she finally said, well, Kevin, if you want to do something about it, here's what you can do. Quit blowing up my ear. So that's kind of how I got into it. I mean, I was probably a voice of discontent showing up at assembly meetings. And they finally said, well, why don't you quit complaining and start contributing to the solutions? So there is the super frenzied background of Kevin Cross.
Wow. Okay. That totally makes sense. And also, I think what I got from that really is you're blue collar. You've come up doing many different things. Started as, bathroom washer at a gas station. That's not just humble. That's like salt of the earth.
All my blue collar shirts now have are kind of brown around it from sweating and working in the dirt. So
Right. Well, you had mentioned a little bit about, being at the assembly meetings more recently and blowing up Jamie Allard. What are some of the things that you've seen that this assembly is pushing forward, or at least the agenda that the assembly has said that they want to contribute to? And why has that rubbed you the wrong way?
Oh, I didn't know this was going to be an 8-hour podcast. So so I'm a business owner, right? Again,
yeah.
I worked in the trades, but then I started getting into real estate, and I own a couple local businesses. And there's some basic fundamentals of running a business. And one is that you can't just always go out and spend money willy-nilly. Money needs to be held accountable before you start running up debt and taking out more credit cards. And this assembly has been so fast to first blow past the tax cap and then go out, and because they've blown through the tax cap, think that we just do bonds. And for the public doesn't understand, bonds are just debt. It's just a loan that you're then securing and saying, we guarantee we're going to pay it or we're going to do this. But, that's not how you run a business. Instead of looking at the individual departments and saying, are we holding these dollars accountable? Are we spending them responsibly? And let's focus on getting our house in order before we start charging up the credit cards. It blows my mind. And most of the public is working so hard at their jobs, trying to raise their families. Just, they don't immerse themselves in the project. When you read the assembly, when you see the, when you see the ordinances come out or an amendment come out, sometimes they're 25, 30 pages. When you're trying to make dinner for your kids and you're trying to get you got a job and maybe you have to work overtime or whatever it is, you don't have time to read through all that. You're assuming that your legislators who you hired to represent you have read this and understand the ramifications for what they're doing. And I don't think they do. I think that they assume that somebody else did their homework for them. And when it shows up on the floor, they just vote for it along party lines and just go, well, it sounds good. I really don't think a lot of them, they hand it off to an attorney to write and say, this is what I want it to be. And then it lands in their desk. So part of the issue is that I feel like we have an assembly, and then that spreads off further, right? It starts with our local government and spreads all the way to the federal. And then it just keeps going that have been they're too immersed in the process. They're too deep in it. They've lost touch with reality. They haven't run a business in a long time. They haven't they haven't had to crawl in their crawl space and fix plumbing leaks or whatever it is and just understand and make things work. So particularly the tax cap and the blowing of bonds. And more recently, this, I really don't like this 2021 11-7 that was just passed last night at the assembly. At the platting board, as chair of the platting board, we have disgruntled people come before us all the time. I don't know if you're aware of this, but if 18 to 25 houses are going to be built behind you, you may not be happy about that. And so
I would 100%.
Yeah, and understandably so. You're concerned about your neighborhood. You're concerned about drainage issues. And people come before us very passionate all the time. We listen to them. Even if they get off topic, that's okay. But we always try to respect the individual when they're grieving their frustrations with who we are, their representative in their government. And our current assembly does not seem to feel that same way. It's almost they've created and put barriers in there, and part of the animus and part of the frustration and some of the into what can be some of the unreasonable behavior you see from the constituents and the people in the audience are a direct result of not feeling listened to. Right. And not feeling represented, and creating and putting more rules in place, not bringing down barriers, but saying, well, now the chair has the right to kick everybody out if they feel like it's unreasonable, or have security escort people out, or shut you down if you get off topic. You are not adding to the communication that desperately needs to take place. So
I 100% agree with you, Kevin. 100% agree with you. And I think what we hear from our listeners a lot and our readers is the fact of what you just said there. When it's time for public testimony, most people on that diocese are on their phones, they're on their computers, they're not even paying attention, they're not looking. And we've seen this in the recent past where public testimony has now turned to, hey, pay attention, look at me, I'm talking to you. And there's people calling it out. And you know what happens? Have you seen this, Kevin? For example, my favorite, Mr. Christopher Constant, who gets called out, then goes to the chair and says, they're being disrespectful. They're calling me out. That's against the rules. And so now, like you said, there's this natural division that's happening. The obstacles you're talking about, let's tear them down. They're just adding and adding and adding. And there just seems to be no end to what they're willing to do to keep creating a larger moat between them and the public. And so one of the questions I have for you is, when you announce, maybe just to friends or your close, community there, or maybe even the broader community now that you're kicking off, and we'll talk about the event you're having tonight and your website, what are you hearing from people specifically now that you've sort of declared, when I said I'd never go into politics, well, it's gotten bad enough where I need to get into politics. What have you heard from those people?
Scott, I want you to know that was my question. So thank you very much for filling me in. That's good.
No problem.
I appreciate that. So for the long time, the thing about conservatives are, and I consider myself a conservative first, Republican second, because the party may change, but my core values never will. Right. So the thing about what I've grown and people that I associate with is we're hardworking. We run our businesses. We do it, and we assume that, everybody else is just going to work hard, do right by their neighbor, raise their kids, and you're just going to be left alone. We really just want to live in peace. We understand that with freedom comes responsibility, and we're going to be responsible first to our families and our neighbors. And we don't typically poke our fingers in other people's business. That's just, that's part of what it means to have limited government. And what's funny is you think at some point, if you watched enough of the media, that am I the crazy person? Like, what's going on in the world? Am I the guy that should be wearing a muskrat hat and cleaning a black powder rifle on the corner of my yard while whittling a cane? Like, how far off the deep end am I when I look at the news? And then you start talking to people and going, have you seen this? And I will tell you, the outpouring of support is huge.
Yeah.
It's so refreshing for all you individuals who feel like maybe you're the crazy one. You're not. I will tell you that we are the actual silent majority. We're just too busy raising our families and doing what we need to do to be busybodies. The problem is that, our greatest strength is also our greatest weakness. And you hear that, is that, yes, we are strong, independent individuals who focus first on our families and don't tell other people what to do. But that also means that sometimes we have low voter turnout because we're busy with our families. We're busy taking, we also have a tendency not to speak up because we were taught to respect our elders and only spoke when spoken to, and not, try to keep. And unfortunately, that is, if everybody behaved that way, it would work out really well. But when individuals who have a tendency of not knowing the difference between a problem and an inconvenience, and over dramatizing things, and then creating problems with, and that's what I see. I see a lot of government involves themselves in things that is not their responsibility. Okay. Yeah. And that's what, and so you guys, I'm here to tell you, for the other people who listen, they're out there working, you're not alone. You're not crazy. you would not believe how many people have your support. And the other side of that that's really shocking, Scott, and I want to point this out, is I can't tell you how many people I've had who've come out and said, Kevin, I got your back. I support you 100%, but don't tell anybody I'm a conservative because I would get chewed up at work. Right? I would hey, listen, if my boss, and most of it, by the way, is people who work in state jobs or have state things or involved with it in government somehow, don't let anybody do that. Is a shame. That is a shame that we've allowed people to become so polarized that we can't sit and, I maybe have very strong values and I may be very conservative, but at the same time, it's critical that we listen to each other, because shutting people down, not listening to them and making them feel like they're not important or their problems are not legitimate is not how you resolve the issue. You will exasperate. And a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. You can shut them down, you can be them, make them quiet, and you can force them to conform. But the fact of the matter is they will become that much more adamant about their position. And now they have resentment. And I think, so I've been in real estate actually for almost 30 years. I've only had a real estate license for the last 15 or 16 years. I don't remember what exactly it was, and I will tell you, during that time, you learn how to negotiate even with people you don't agree with.
Right.
You can have very strong opinions or even be backed by facts, but the other individuals, you find that most people make an emotional decision and then try to justify it with other facts are at their fingertips. And so the way that you diffuse an emotional argument and you get people to work with you, and that's what we need to do. We've been too busy. We've spent too much time placating to the other side and saying, oh, we'll give up a little ground because we're the nice guy. We're the little bit of ground. We're the nice guy. That needs to stop. And the way you stop is, one, find common ground. And then, what about that is important to you? I do not think that people that are on the far left are beyond reproach and they can't be negotiated with. I think what needs to happen is they need to realize, and there needs to take place in dialogue, because, we all have opinions, and opinions can be changed if enough time is spent and we stick true to our values. So I don't think that they can't, I don't think it's a lost cause. I don't think that it's just one way. I think what it takes is approaching the problem from a different situation, saying we need to be that much more vigorous and that much better of negotiators in our stance and being able to verbalize and communicate what it is we believe if we're going to bring them back to us.
So I have a question for you. Seems to me that the Anchorage Assembly has turned its work into not just a full-time job, but they're working 50, 60, 70 hours a week at this assembly work. And in doing so, that they are hiring more people to help them. So they're hiring aides and they're hiring staff to support their work, because they have created so much work for themselves. And it's almost like they are trying to create a parallel executive branch. And just, you're going to have 12 of them. And with 12 of them working 50 to 60 hours a week at that work, which you really should be just some things like passing budgets and, passing a few ordinances and resolutions and thanking people for their service and giving them a nice certificate. But now we see them just working all the time. How much time should this assembly be spending at this work?
Well, Susan, I'm so glad you bring that up, because you are exactly right. That is because we have a legislative branch that is trying to defunct and push the executive branch, out of the picture. That's what that supermajority is doing. Everything that we elected Dave Bronson to do, they're against regardless. What they did to B. Hansen, it was ridiculous. If you looked at the credentials of that woman, you would be wildly impressed. But it was a political maneuver that they put to shut her down, right? So that's just frustrating. That's sad. And you're right. Listen, your job is to, the assembly is to be the legislative, but they're having to hire all these people and do these things because they won't let the mayor run the executive branch. So yeah, they're doing two jobs. They got committees and subcommittees. And here's the thing, they're busybodies. You do not need to be in everything. So let me tell you something to tell you the unintended consequences of what government does. Maybe you're not aware of this, but I'm going to tell you what's happened in the last 2 years in housing that has driven housing costs through the roof. Okay. And so as a real estate professional, as an investor, as a landlord, here's what we saw happen. When COVID first hit back in March of 2020, everybody remembers the first thing they went is they gave everybody checks, just wrote checks willy-nilly. Well, I'm here to tell you that the largest effect that those checks had was every dumpster I had in my apartment buildings got filled with flat screen TV boxes, Xboxes, and big, ridiculous purchase items. Not on rent and not on housing, okay? So rather than just write checks, maybe that money could have been better directed towards assisting individuals with those things like utility bills and those things that help with actual living expenses. But they did. They just throw money at the problem. Well, when you drive that money towards it, one is that you just created a consumption problem, right? So that adds to inflation because now you have a bunch of people with money and they're not saving it for their next house. They're not buying, they're not investing in their stocks. They're not putting it towards retirement. A lot of people just went out and consumed. Okay. That's just a natural human behavior. The other thing they did is they lowered the qualifications to get rental assistance, which means they started just paying people for rent, even people who didn't have a job issue. I know for a fact I had individuals, all I had to do was claim. I had tenants who all they had to do was claim. And I know other real estate apartment building owners and other landlords who had tenants. They said, these guys are working and they're getting their rent paid for. Well, when you start injecting artificial rent payments into that system, what does that do to rent? Well, I will tell you the average 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit in Anchorage was probably about $900, $950 in early 2020. By the end of the year, it was $1,100. You had shot it up 10 to 15% in less than a year. Rents went up. Why? Because when the state or an agency is writing the checks, one, then you can ask for more because it's no longer market driven. The second thing is the cost of everything went up because of inflation. The cost of getting plumbers, getting everybody, right? So that all went up. So when you raise the cost of housing up to $1,200 or $1,500 or whatever it is for a decent unit, now individuals that are in the work pool who were making $15, $17 an hour, that's not enough money. Okay. Now they're struggling with their paychecks to pay rent. Okay. Those individuals who aren't on housing. So now what do they have an option? One is they can sit at home and not work and make more money than they are at their job because we created a system that drove all the cost up. So then we're wondering why we can't fill jobs. Well, the reason you can't fill positions is because you threw so much money into the system willy-nilly without holding it accountable and without directing those funds directly where they needed to be, which is at the actual hardship, utility expenses, things like that. You just cut checks. You lowered the qualifications for people who need assistance. You drove the cost of everything up. And now people can't afford, they can't live off a $15 to $20 an hour beginning pay job. And then they wonder why everything goes to squat. And they all stand around each other going, well, we wrote all these checks. Why isn't it working? Because you don't have a plan and you don't run government like a business. Anybody who runs a business understands that when you got to understand the unintended consequences of you writing checks willy-nilly. I mean, if you have a contractor working for you and he sends you invoices, you say, hey, how much is labor? How much is parts? How many hours did you work on a job? Are we any closer to having a roof on this? But this assembly doesn't even care if the roof is leaking. They just spend money on more painting the stains out of the ceiling. They don't solve the problem. They cover it up. And so forgive me if I get really passionate, but, as a business owner, sometimes if you guys ever see me in my pictures, I have no hair. And that's probably from beating my head on the wall, just wondering, do they not understand basic business fundamentals? So,
no, I think you're 100% right. 100% right. And not only that, it's pretty evident that the assembly itself, they find no issue with it. It's almost like if you come against the spending, particularly if we remember back in 2020 with the AO 2020-66, I believe, which was the purchasing of that real estate with the CARES Act funds, which needed to go to the people, the small businesses, instead looking to be landlords and looking to provide this sort of industrial complex for the vagrants here in Anchorage, which I don't know if you were there for that. There was plenty in the community from all areas that were not in favor of that at all. And yet what they did is they do what they always do, which they did when they passed this mask mandate as an emergency. they find a way to skirt the public to get what they want done, as opposed to what they were elected to do, which is represent their constituents. And so I guess, Kevin, one of the questions. Oh,
no, I was
ahead
going to
if you
say
have
the
something to
mask mandate was a glorious distraction to get people passionate about something that they, one, shouldn't be involved in, because it's your personal right to whatever, that's, again, their job was to protect the Constitution. Let's throw that out the window.
Right.
But the second thing is, let's create an issue around something that is kind of ridiculous, so you don't see our outrageous failures in all these other areas. Let's not focus on the quality of students that's coming out of our schools and how we're failing them horribly. Let's worry about what they have on their faces. Okay. I will tell you that whether the kids were masked or not, they would still be a dismal failure for regarding the children that are coming out and the education that they're being provided. It is a distraction. But it's a magnificent distraction, because here we are talking about it instead of why reading scores and math scores are so ridiculously low.
Hey, so
100%.
So Scott, can we get some information up on about where people can find out more about Kevin Gross? This has been fascinating, and Kevin, you are on fire. This is a really strong candidate. I can see that. I mean, anybody listening to this podcast can tell that you are a very strong candidate for Eagle River, and we need to get the word out about how people can find you and maybe go to your fundraiser tonight. If they're listening to this, they can still probably pop over to Jalapenos and meet you in person. So Scott, what's that looking like?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, Kevin, you got a fundraiser tonight starting at 5:30 at Jalapenos in Eagle River, and you'll be there. I think it's your kickoff fundraising events, right?
That is correct. And I really appreciate people showing up. Don't judge me, because I will not be wearing a tie. Again, I still do not own any. Starts at 5:30. I'm happy to take your questions and engage. And I appreciate you recognizing my passion. It's been building up inside of me for a long time. But yes, and then my website is crossforak.com, and that's CROSSFORAK.com. Go on there. I'm going to start posting weekly videos on things that I've seen, things that I think need to be addressed, and having links to those. So we're putting those together now, just so that, what I find is interesting is how little we actually know about our campaigns that comes before Election Day. I'm not a politician. I'm just an angry business owner who's been forced into the role. And whatever I can do to make sure that people are educated in the decisions that they make, because I think a lot of what we've had in government is that they exist because of, whether you call it willful or intentional ignorance of the populace, who do not know who they're voting for until they get in the office and then realize, what the heck just happened? I was totally sold a different bill of goods. I don't intend on being that candidate. I am, if this doesn't work out, I'm perfectly happy going back to my job, working construction and being a voracious voice of discontent in the assembly meetings.
Right.
I will continue to work hard to represent private property rights and small business owners, to live our lives and raise our families as we see fit. Without
Very good. Well, Eagle River, you've got a choice here. This is somebody who's going to fight for you, and it looks to me like you are aligned with both Jamie Allard, who represents Eagle River, and Mayor Bronson. If I'm not mistaken from this interview, I think you're pretty well aligned.
Well, Jamie Allard should not be a lone crusader in a desolate world trying to fight back the forces of oppression. She needs I don't know if we get matching unitards or what that is, but I mean, we're going to end up having to form a coalition of conservatives, so that we can just know that we're out here to protect your rights. And we do this as parents that have kids and have families we're trying to raise. And everything I do is to fight for them, because I look at their beautiful little faces and I'm like, you guys deserve a better world. And I was put here. I'm gifted by God to be in this position, to serve our community on earth, to fight for our kids, to make sure they don't wake up one day wondering why they're in a cage.
Well, I appreciate that, Kevin, and we appreciate your time today. It's been awesome talking with you. I think our listeners are going to enjoy this and get to know you a little bit better. So thank you for joining with us today. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate
Scott,
you.
I think
amazing.
Scott, I think maybe if we post this a little bit early, it wouldn't hurt my feelings a bit. I mean, I think people need to hear this podcast. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And again, if you wanna, go to the event tonight, it's at Jalapenos starting at 5:30 in Eagle River. You get to meet Kevin and kind of pick his brain. And also, if you want to learn a little bit more and you can't do the event, you can also donate or learn about Kevin at his website, CrossForeak.com. Well, Kevin, thanks again. I totally appreciate it. Suzanne, thanks for joining with me today. I really appreciate you being here. And listen,
tough to get on Monday.
Absolutely. If you haven't a chance and you want to support what we do and continue helping us give you a better, well-rounded view and conservative view of the news, you can go to mustreadalaska.com and click the donation button up at the top right-hand corner. Also, you can like us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube at Must Read Alaska, all one word, and subscribe, hit the notification bell. And of course, I'm going to go through the list. MeWe, Parler, Twitter, Rumble. We're all on there under mustreadalaska.com. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining with me. If you have a chance tonight, go ahead and go out to Eagle River at 5:30 at Jalapenos to meet Kevin. It'll be a great time. But until tomorrow, take care, Alaska.